Welcome back to Joe Stunner Boxing. Before I start the video, a few people, more than a few people, have said, how come you're wearing that big Uncle Fester dressing gown? What's all that about? Where's the t-shirts? We like the t-shirts. Well, the t-shirts will be back, but at the moment it's winter woolies time. And on a more serious note, it's because I refuse to put the heating on. I'm sick to death of these thieving bastards, energy companies, constantly increasing their prices. You've got old people who can't even afford to keep themselves alive because of the heating costs. You've got a so-called Labour government that cut winter fuel costs for some pensioners. So you think you're getting any money out of me, you thieving fuckers? No, you are not. No, you're not. I'm wrapping up and I haven't had the heating on yet and it's not going on. You're not getting a penny more than usual out of me, you dirty bastards. Anyway, enough of that. Let me talk about the subject of today's video, which is Sam Langford. Now, Sam Langford very often is cited as, if not the greatest fighter ever. I've met many people who've said that, but certainly one of the top 5, 10, at least top 10. And there's a very, very good reason for this. And I'm going to just cover Sam Langford a little bit in this video. I mean, how much can you say in only a 10, 15-minute video, however long this is going to last? I'll do my best, though, okay, to sort of cover his career, which is lengthy. So Sam Langford, who is he, first of all? Okay, well, his nickname was the Boston Tar Baby. I think he was also called the Boston Crusher or Bone Crusher or something like that. Anyway, Boston Tar Baby, I think it's a brilliant nickname, so I'm going to stick with that one. And he was born in 1886 in Nova Scotia, Canada. Passed away at the age of 69, blind and penniless, in 1956. He turned pro in 1902, 1 week after his 16th birthday. And he had his final fight at the age of 38. That was in 1926. And he ended up with his... Now, before I go any further with these statistics, I'm going by BoxRec figures, BoxRec records, because that's normally the source everyone goes to. And now these records for a lot of these early young, the very, very, the old timers, the pioneers and so on, these records are open to debate because very often, I mean, constantly they're unearthing, oh, this fight took place, which we didn't realize. So they add that and they, oh, this is incorrect, so we take that out. These records are not set in stone. They're not the gospel truth. But I'll go with BoxRec's records because that's the source that most people use, okay? So according to BoxRec, Langford had 178 wins with 128 knockouts or stoppages, 30 losses, only stopped 8 times, and 38 draws, okay? And he fought from lightweight to heavyweight. Like I say, he turned pro when it was just after his 16th birthday. He was about 5'7" tall, and even though a lot of the weights aren't even recorded, but for his earlier fights, but even so, some of the weights are debatable. But he was a small guy, 5'7" tall. Probably at the most he was a super middle, maybe maybe a couple of pounds over a super middle, probably in his later career. Now, bearing that in mind, he fought Hall of Fame fighters from lightweight to heavyweight, and he never fought for the heavyweight title, the universally recognized heavyweight title, but he did hold the colored heavyweight title, which a lot of people would argue was actually more legitimate than the universally recognized heavyweight title, because it consisted of all the black fighters who were not given a chance at the quote-unquote real title because they were black. And there was a shit ton of racism around in those days, and, there was the colour bar that was in place, what they called the colour bar. But it isn't just his heavyweight achievements, bearing in mind he was a small guy, that are so stunning, and I'll go through those in a moment. He also beat lighter weight fighters, some of them in their prime, a lot of them in their prime, actually. And probably the best example is, which one shall I pick? Because there's so many. Okay, so let's have a think about this. Okay, Sam Langford turned pro in 1902, and like most fighters, he went on a streak of one fight after the other, fighting virtually every other week. Okay, he fought the great lightweight champion, Joe Gans. Okay. Now, Gans had been a pro for 10 years. I think he was 17 at the time Langford fought him. In 1903, he fought this 10-year pro who, by the way, would go on to have his own Hall of Fame career. 147 wins with 101 KOs, 10 defeats, that's all, and 16 draws. Langford beat Joe Gans in only his second year as a pro in 1903. Okay, it was just above the lightweight limit. Joe Gans was lightweight champ and a great lightweight champ. I think he won the welterweight title. I think a welterweight belt as well. I think, yeah, I'll have to check on that. But yeah, so that was his second. He's beaten a Hall of Fame fighter in only his second year as a professional. It's an astonishing, that alone is an astonishing achievement. Okay, just that one fight. Okay, but there's more. Okay, so let's go to the other end of his career. Just jump forward. I'll come back to the start of it, but I want to just give you another example of how great this guy was. Which is, sometimes we can look at individual fights and they can highlight just how great someone was. In 1922. At the age of, that would have made him 36. So it's 2 years before he retired. And this is the point where Langford's, he had, I'll mention this, go into a bit more detail later on. He had very bad eyesight. He eventually did go completely blind. He beat Tiger Flowers, another great fighter, who would go on to be world middleweight champion. He knocked him out in 2 rounds. Okay. And this was an old Sam Langford. At the age of 36, he knocked out Tiger Flowers in 2 rounds. Again, absolutely astonishing. So at the start of his career, when he was 17, 18, he's beaten Gans, who's a Hall of Fame brilliant fighter. And then right at the end of his career, even though he's knackered and old and going blind, he still knocks out Tiger Flowers in 2 rounds. It's extraordinary. But anyway, let's go back in time, all the way back to roughly the start of his career, okay? Because he fought... the only world title fight he had that wasn't for a coloured title was this was in 1904, so he'd have been a pro 2 years, roughly 2 years. Okay, he fought Barbados Joe Walcott. Now, Barbados Joe Walcott, not to be confused, of course, with Jersey Joe Walcott, who came much later, was welterweight champion, and he finished his career with 87 wins, 24 defeats, and 24 draws. They fought a lot in those days, trust me. And he himself was a great fighter. And it was a 15-round draw. So that's the closest Langford ever came to winning a so-called legitimate title. Again, the coloured belts, the coloured titles were probably just as worthy, if not more worthy, than these so-called legitimate ones. But most of the news reports cite Langford as really having won that fight. He should have been champ. I think he floored, don't quote me on this actually, but I think he floored Walcott in that fight, if I remember rightly, what I've read. And again, for such a young pro to do that to an established champion, to get a 15-round draw was pretty astounding. But now let's move up to heavyweight, okay? Again, I repeat, he was a small guy, but he went all the way to heavyweight. And he fought dozens of times against other extremely talented black fighters who were not going to get a sniff at the mainstream heavyweight title. So they would play this round robin of, fighting for the coloured heavyweight title, which Langford held a record 5 times. Okay. So let's go through a few of the opponents. All right. Before we get to that, just as an aside, one of the fighters he fought 6 times was Jack Blackburn. Jackie Blackburn went on to train Joe Louis, and he got 1 win, and I think there were 4 draws and 1 no contest. But Jack Blackburn, people forget, was a pretty decent fighter himself, pretty decent fighter. got all those draws against Langford, so he must have been good. But if we go back to the sort of ostracised, out in the cold, in limbo, brilliant black heavyweights of that era, Sam Langford fought. We'll talk about Joe Jeanette. All right, Joe Jeanette, brilliant fighter. Go look him up on BoxRec. Langford fought him 14 times, won 8, and had 4 draws. Okay. Another brilliant heavyweight was Sam McVeigh. Langford fought him 15 times. Okay. He had 6 wins with 2 losses and 7 draws. Okay. And by the way, McVeigh's eventual record, I mean, I'll give you another example. McVeigh's eventual record was 74 wins with 60 KOs, so he could pop a bit. 14 losses and 10 draws, you know. Then he also beat fireman Jim Flynn, who he fought him 6 times and won 5. Now, why do I mention fireman Jim Flynn? Because fireman Jim Flynn was the only man to knock out Jack Dempsey. And a lot of people said, well, Dempsey hadn't eaten for 7 days and was knackered and there was something, he's street homeless. And yeah, well, that may be true, but he still managed to knock out Jack Dempsey. And McVeigh beat him 5 out of 6 times. So again, another example of just how great Sam Langford was. Yeah, who else did we have? Harry Wills. Let's mention Harry Wills because he was another brilliant heavyweight. Langford fought Harry Wills 17 times. Okay, Harry Wills was a great fighter, a great fighter. Go look at his record on BoxRec. I can't go into it here because this is meant to be about, Langford. Maybe I'll do a separate video on Harry Wills. But he fought him 17 times. He lost 14 times to Wills, who was a much, much bigger man. But he did win 2. And he also had 2 draws. Now, interestingly, the 2 that he won against Wills were 14th and 19th round knockouts. So he knocked him out in the 14th round and 19th round. Wills was a terrific fighter. A lot of people regard him as good as Jack Johnson. A lot of people say Sam Langford was better than Jack Johnson. And I think that sort of sums up Sam Langford's greatness. The fact that he was fighting these people, Harry Wills, Sam McVeigh, Joe Jeanette, that they were just the heavyweights. And he was able to hang with them and, in fact, had winning records against most of them. It's quite extraordinary, really. What he achieved is just unbelievable. Well, anyway, as I said earlier, throughout his career, his eyesight was failing. And he would eventually go blind, completely blind, and was penniless. He was living in Harlem in New York City. And I think there were a few charitable endeavors I remember reading about at the time, which would raise a bit of money for him, to look after him. Eventually, he died at the age of 69. A truly great fighter. And even after he'd retired, so many people said that he was one of the best fighters they'd ever seen. But even after he retired, he was still remained a sort of cult figure. And in fact, now when you mention Sam Langford, a lot of boxing fans, even the hardcore fans, will say, yeah, I've heard that name. I don't know much about him, though. Well, that's what the internet's for. That's what, BoxRec's for, if you like. Again, the records might not be perfect, but you can get a pretty damn good idea of how good someone was from looking at their records. Sam Langford, go and watch it. Well, I say go and watch him. Is there any footage of him, live footage? Don't think there is. Have I seen any? Oh, I should have looked this up before I started doing the video. Have I ever seen? Is there any footage of Sam Langford? There might be odds and ends, but that's all. See, this is what happens when you get to my age. You forget shit. But a great fighter. Anyway, a great fighter. And, there have been books about him as well. I've read one biography. I can't remember who wrote it. I think it was actually called The Boston Tar Baby. But check this guy out. Go look at his record on BoxRec. And also look at the records of people like Harry Wills. Great fighter. I'm going to do a video on Harry Wills at some point. Joe Jeanette. Jeremiah Jeanette was his real name. He's called Joe Jeanette. He was a great fighter. And a lot of times, people will look at these guys, like, for example, Sam McVeigh had 14 losses. And people will say, oh, he lost 14 times, as if that matters. Look at the quality of the opposition. Look at the people who were fighting, for Christ's sake. If you don't fight anyone, or you don't fight people at their absolute zenith, then what? If you're fighting people who are past it, or you're playing that sort of, I hate to say it, but Sugar Ray Leonard, Mayweather, Tyson Fury thing, where you sort of picking people at the right time when you think they're on the slide, and all that sort of navigating through the choppy waters to avoid people. Yeah, you can get very few losses on your record, but if you're prepared to fight anyone at any time, Barbados Joe Walcott had 24 defeats. Who gives a fuck? You know what I mean? No one gives a shit. Look at the quality of the opposition. Anyway, I won't go into a rant about the zero, the great O, as people call it. I don't give a fuck about that. Go and have a look at, go and read up on Sam Langford and a few of the others as well. Sam McVeigh, Harry Wills, Joe Jeanette. One other person actually, that's another fighter he beat that springs to mind, that I don't think I've mentioned him yet, was Philadelphia Jack O'Brien, who at the time, was he the light heavyweight champ at the time? I don't think he was. But in 1911, Jack O'Brien, again, is another Hall of Famer. Sam Langford knocked him out in 5 rounds. What the fuck? He's a light heavyweight. Sam Langford was never really a light heavyweight, not in terms of weight and size and stature. A brilliant fighter, Sam Langford. Go and have a look. Anyway, thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're new to the channel, you could subscribe. That would be great too. And more to come, of course. But leave your comments below if you've got any. I'll have a read and I'll answer as many as I can. Ladies and gentlemen, you take care of yourselves. Bye for now.